Hi, I'm Jason Willoughby with Reach the City Ministries. Thank you for watching this series of clips on help for addiction. We're going to look at a third bonus issue beyond the basics that we covered in our 5 main ones, and that's the issue of grandiosity, the ginormous ego that comes along with addiction. Because shame is such a driver of addiction, and failure and inferiority are also its byproducts, many times the addict will try to veer to the opposite extreme of grandiosity and trying to be great and big and high and above it all, as if the universe revolves around them, as if they're above everything, sitting on Mount Olympus, telling the whole world what they should be and doing. And so grandiosity is a major issue in this society and in individuals' lives. Let's take a look at some things the Bible tells us about grandiosity. Very interestingly, both addiction and the evil forces behind it are known and marked by grandiosity. Think of like Simon Magus in Acts 8, who was a magician up in Samaria. He didn't just exercise power, people called him the great power of God, as if he was literally God's power in human form. Quite a big ego, don't you think? And there are other examples. Going back to the garden, we have Satan's temptation of Eve. Notice the appeal to ego. Eat, and you will be as gods, knowing good and evil. You'll be high and way big. You'll be great and exalted if you just take it. So there's that ego appeal and also that inflated sense of self that comes from following and becoming enslaved to evil. Think of in Daniel chapter 7, the Antichrist, the little horn of Daniel, is full of brags and boasts. So evil is grandiose and full of bragging. In Revelation, the Antichrist in chapter 13, again, his mouth is full of boasts and blasphemies. It is the nature of evil and hence idolatry and hence addiction to have this compensating for inferiority with grandiosity and inflated ego and greatness. And so be aware of that as you're dealing with addiction. Let me paint a sad portrait of a person in addiction who is suffering from grandiosity. First of all, nobody can tell them different. They are right about everything. Nobody can help them. They don't need any help. Nobody can confront them with truth because they have their own truth they go by. They're in denial. They pretend they don't have a problem. They pretend they're sufficient and able to self-fix it. And so this swelling pride, in AA it's known as ego bloat. You have this bloated, giant ego masking a deep root of failure and inferiority, driving you to go to the opposite extreme. So grandiosity is a factor, and it's there if you have ears to hear. But there's a terrible downside of grandiosity, of ego bloat. Whoever sits on the throne of the universe has all the pressure of the universe. And a grandiose person literally, and especially in this time, aided by these devices, we're literally in the false perspective of looking down on everything and being above it all through our little screens. And the truth is, we're under everything. We're not grandiose and great at all. We're small little human beings. But because of these devices, we're trained to see ourselves as high and great and above it all. But the downside of that is we have all that pressure and we can't possibly manage the universe. We can't even manage ourselves. So you're in a condemned if you do, condemned if you don't situation called a double bind. You need to manage the universe, but you're impossibly unable to manage the universe. And so that's where these double binds produce panic attacks. You're like, ah. The other thing about grandiosity is inflating us up to the 30,000 foot level. Any failure is like leaping from a 30,000 foot jet, you smash and hit the ground. So, this inflation and depression, terrible depression of failed grandiosity, are real, horrible side effects of this addiction produced thing that leads to anxiety and depression. So, what's the cure for grandiosity? Well, it's to do what we've already talked about. It's to come lowly and vulnerable to the one who has all power and authority, who is brimming with infinite love, and who takes over our shame, our failure, and our sin on himself and resolves it at the cross and resurrection and ascension. This is the cure. And what's great is Jesus himself models a non grandiose way of life. In Philippians 2, it says clearly he lowered his level down to becoming a human being. He left the infinite summit of all existence and glory and became a human being. Talk about a downgrade. And not just a human being under authority, a human being unto a humiliating death on the cross in obedience to the Father as the Father's beloved Son. Jesus says to us in Matthew 11, "For I am gentle and lowly at heart, and you shall find rest for your soul." That's the verse God used to save my soul, and it's still a powerful answer to grandiosity. Join with Jesus in being small and low, and find his gentleness and care to refresh you and rest your weary, grandiose soul. Another interesting passage is in 2 Corinthians 12, where Paul, in contrast to the most eminent apostles, these grandiose people going around to churches claiming to be the person, the big person, and Paul, by contrast, says, even though I am a nobody. Jesus was the great infinite somebody, so he didn't have to be that. He could be a lowly nobody under the love and redemption of Christ and serve him come what may. Even if nobody gave him recognition, even if nobody praised him, even if he got trouble and pain for all of his labor, Paul didn't need events to reinforce his ego. I'm just going to say this sick quest to get the entire world to validate and approve of us is grandiosity. It is not of Christ. It is totally anti-gospel. The gospel says we don't need those things because in Christ we are raised up with him to the heavenly places. That's Ephesians 2, where we will see, all the ways God has been gracious to us forever and ever from that vantage point, which is high and with Christ. So if you're looking for the proper kind of exalting, it comes as a gift in Christ to the lowly, the nobodies, the failures, the sinners. That's the cure. That's where we find deliverance from our bloated ego and the grandiosity that kills us in so many ways.